Hello everybody. We are in our last week of the class and we're covering Module 6, which will include Chapter 11, Groups and Individuals, and Chapter 12, Adversity and Happiness. So for our last week, you guys kind of know the deal, how it works here. You've been doing this now for 5 weeks. This week is a little bit of a shorter week. Normally the week starts Monday and it runs to Sunday. This week, the week will be over on Friday. That is when the class actually ends. So you have pretty much until Friday, 11:59 p.m. to get all work in for the week. So that includes your discussion posts as well as the exam that you have on the last two chapters. So it's a little bit more of a crammed week. You want to kind of take a look at everything and space it out, wisely. Being that this is the last week, hopefully you can devote some little bit of extra time to whatever you need to complete to get it done in time. So let's go over the objectives really quickly. For Chapter 11, it's really the culmination of a lot of things that we've been learning so far in the class. So groups and individuals, we're talking about the influence of the group, how a person is affected by others in a group setting, group situation, group dynamic, and as well, how is the group affected by certain individuals? How does status, how does power, how does different elements that are sometimes unique to a particular person, personality, how does that affect the group dynamic? Okay, so we're going to first start by talking about what's meant by a group. How do we define that? What's the role that a group takes? When we study groups, we tend to look at different functions of the group, such as the roles of people within that group, the status of the group in society as a whole, as well as norms that influence the group behavior and how the group is dictated by those norms, as well as the cohesiveness of the group. As an entity, entitativity is this, weird word that you see here, but basically that just means that, each group takes on its own unique elements, its own dynamics that allow it to function and operate in the capacity that that group was meant to. Oftentimes, being part of a group has a meaning to it. Think about all of the groups that you may be a part of. Some of those groups you may have automatically been a part of, like your family, right? You didn't get to choose for good or for worse what your family was. You were born into it. But other groups you do get to choose. Other groups you may want to be a part of, may have a hard time being a part of. And so the group dynamics can change, and those all come with costs and benefits, right? Whenever we're a part of a group, we may have to abide by the standards of the group and the norms of the group and the rules and all of those sorts of things. And that could come at a cost to our individual freedom, the things that we might do as a unique person, a unique entity within the group. But we may choose to go along with certain things in order to be a part of a group, even if individually we don't agree or we wouldn't want that. And we've seen that so far in this class. We've looked at different concepts that operate in that regard, different statuses, different social norms that can affect what we do and don't do, and certainly the dynamics of the group can trigger some of that and play a role in some of that. The situation that we can often find ourselves in can be powerful, as we saw with the Milgram study, just the power of the situation. An authority figure has power over us. A lot of times groups come with various statures within that group. There could be a leader, there could be followers, there could be members, there could be elected officials. And so it varies depending upon who you are in the group, maybe what say you have or what power you have and how that might dictate your behavior. Groups also exert a certain amount of influence on us just by the very nature of them. So if we look at factors like social facilitation, we see that a group can influence us positively or negatively. Sometimes the presence of a group helps us in ways that we wouldn't normally have if we were by ourselves, and sometimes it hinders us, right? Think about how many of you would be comfortable giving a speech right now. That might be terrifying to you, or that may not. Maybe it depends on how comfortable you are with speech giving. If it's something that you like or enjoy or you're good at, the presence of a group may actually enhance your performance. If it's something that terrifies you and just the thought of it makes your palms sweat, it might be something that inhibits your performance. Okay, normally you might be pretty well spoken, but if you're fearful in front of groups, you may not be so well spoken. So we'll be taking a look at the ways that groups can exert that kind of influence. We'll also look at social loafing. I have several different videos on social loafing and social facilitation to give you some examples there. And social loafing is just, the presence of the group can often deter us from acting. I mean, look at what we've seen with Ash's study with conformity, right? We often try to conform to the group, or we think that because we're in a group, we're less accountable. So there's sort of this diffusion of responsibility that happens in a group. And all of this can cause de-individuation. We become less of an individual when we're within the group context. We'll also be looking at cooperation and conflict and social dilemmas within a group. One of the most interesting things we could look at is the dynamics of the group within the jury setting, right? So thinking about being on a jury, being a juror, is such an interesting group dynamic, which requires cooperation to reach a verdict, but often conflicting thoughts and opinions on the way to getting to that verdict. So we'll be taking a look at some of that. I posted a video too. It's just a little clip from 12 Angry Men. It's a great movie, an older movie, and it just looks at all the dynamics of a group in that happens in that jury setting. And so you can take a look at that and really get a sense of what that all means in a real life kind of context. Then we'll also be looking at some different categories of justice. So this is a really interesting concept that we cover that touches in the area of criminal justice. Social psychology is just such an awesome class for CJ majors. But looking at fairness and unfairness and how that's perceived within the group setting and within group dynamics. Not all groups are created equal. We often have power struggles within groups. There's usually leaders and followers, like I said. And so the dynamics are pretty diverse. And navigating that can be tricky. So we'll be looking at some different decision making that happens within groups, as well as some of the consequences of poor decision making within a group. when we have things like group polarization or group think. This is when groups can become very insulated in their decision-making processes and often not see potential dangers or pitfalls of the decisions that they're about to make or the paths they're about to take. And again, their thinking kind of happens within a bubble, so to speak, and that can have a negative outcome. And then also just looking at other ways that we can advocate for better group dynamics and better group decision making. All right, and then the last chapters is kind of like one of my favorites because it covers happiness. It's a very applied aspect of social psychology. So first we're going to talk about adversity. What is it? How do we handle it? Why do we have it? Looking at some individual differences in how people handle adversity within different settings, different group settings like marriage, friendships, on the job, consequences of stress. So we get into a little bit of health psychology here, which is interesting. I don't know that I'd put it here, but that's where it is. So stress management, and those effects there. But all of that leading up to then happiness. What makes for a happy person? How do we measure happiness? What kinds of concepts are related to one's happiness? Is there a true way to achieve it? So it's an interesting chapter. I think it applies to everybody. I think you'll enjoy it. So let me just take the few remaining minutes we have here to cover what we have left. You've got your article readings here. This one's on the Stanford Prison Study, which will go along with the video. And then we have another article about happiness and wealth. So we want to read that. You have your lecture slides. And here's all the videos that I was talking about. I have just a lot of short video clips this week. I've got Group Think. Here's the 12 Angry Men video clip. I've got some videos on social loafing. Again, these are all very short videos. Diffusion of responsibility within a group setting. And then this video goes along with the reading. This is the original Stanford Prison Study video. So interesting. So you're going to take a look at that. And that's a longer-ish video. It's about 50 minutes if I'm remembering correctly. And here's a modern day issue dealing with the Stanford prison experiment that you can take a look at. And then here's a video on happiness. This is a Dateline special. It was done on The Secrets of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky and Dan Goldman. Such a great video where they studied happiness across cultures. And what did they come up with? What did they find was related to people's happiness? And so this is a video through our database, but you can, if you have any trouble clicking on it or doesn't want to open up for you, just follow kind of these instructions that I've given you here, and hopefully that should run. But it's through our video database that we have through CIT, so I'm hoping everything will work fine with it. Again, use Google Chrome or Firefox for the best results there. Your discussion deals with the videos and the article readings and the chapters, so remember to be integrating all of those into your responses this week as you talk about the Stanford Prison Study and you talk about happiness, particularly income versus leisure time. What would Americans want? What do you think they'd want? And what would make them happy? And then lastly, you have exam 6. And again, that's due Friday by 11:59 p.m. And that pretty much wraps up the week. This is the last week, so just email me if you have any questions, you get stuck, and you need some help or clarification. I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, you guys have been a really great class, a short but good class. I've enjoyed our interactions online and email, And I just wish you all the best for the rest of the semester and the summer.